Welcome to Digital PR Explained, the podcast where we attempt to break down a topic in digital PR in less than 20 minutes. Today, I have Joe Donatelli with me. Joe is the digital director at News 5 Cleveland, where Joe has grown the station's social media following, website visitors, and video views. And he's also launched the What Happened Now newsletter. Joe leads a staff that has won a host of regional, that didn't sound right. I'm going to pause here. Joe leads a staff that has won a regional Murrow Emmy and All Ohio Excellence in Journalism Awards. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Britt. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. We connected because I've been following along along with your journey on LinkedIn. I also came across your Substack recently. I'll link to that in the show notes too. So not only are you in charge of a newsletter for Cleveland 5 or News 5 Cleveland, you also have your own newsletter, and my listeners, I'm encouraging you all to follow Joe there as well. We'll link to those in the show notes. But Joe is here to talk a lot today about where PR can best intersect with local TV news. And we're going to focus on local TV, which is a topic that I haven't really explored a lot on this particular podcast. I had the opportunity to do that on We Earn Media, but this is a whole new one for Digital PR Explained. So Joe, before I can just go on and on about you and the work that you do, why don't you give my listeners a perspective on what the day in the life of a digital news director looks like?
Sure. So at Channel 5, we are 7 days a week with our website, which I have a team that runs the website and the app and the social media. I work with a lot of folks in our newsroom on that. And, I check our app and our website when I wake up, sometime after 5 a.m. And this doesn't happen often, but if news is breaking, if we have severe weather, if something happens, I'll jump in, that early sometimes and see if our morning content producer needs support. Generally, they don't. Usually there's not too much happening at 5 or 6 in the morning, but sometimes, when I come into work, the first thing I do is check in with that content producer, see what they need. The morning in news is a very busy time. There's a lot of information that's released. We get a lot of updates from government sources. Things happen overnight. Sometimes crimes, sometimes news breaks, and we have to react to it in some way. So I get caught up with my morning content producer. At 9:45 a.m., I go to a meeting where we plan out the shows that will air on Channel 5 in Cleveland at 4, 5, 6, and 7. And we talk about what stories are going to go on TV. So reporters pitch stories. Producers select those pitches. They decide where they're going to go in the show. Are they going to lead the 6 o'clock news? Will this be in the 5:30 block? Where's it going to go? And then after that meeting, which usually lasts about 20 minutes, I sit down with my team and we figure out how we're going to support the TV station for the day. So if we have news that's breaking right then or stories that we know we're going to cover all day, we'll dedicate a digital content producer to covering that story. If not, we'll work on original stories for the website so that we have fresh stories and interesting things for our audience. And then, later on during the day, it's kind of fun. Those web stories that were pitched in the morning, they come in and we try to get those on the website by the time they air at 4, 5, 6, or 7. But when they are published, we attach the video from the packages. And, those stories always have the potential to get a huge audience in local TV news. At a station like ours, we do a lot of what's called enterprise journalism, which means we're the only people who might be covering a story. And so a lot of those stories we see immediate traffic on. That's a really short answer to what could be a really long answer because, I could go home that night and there's a couple severe weather alerts and then I'm jumping back on to help our Nightside web producer. Or, we get a late in the day press conference or somebody does a news dump and they want to put information out late in the day and then my day extends. But on average, it's a manageable day.
Okay. Oh, yeah. One of my first questions was, what are your hours like? It doesn't sound like you have a set hour.
I'm paying attention to our web products every day from around 5 or 6 in the morning till around 9 o'clock at night. And then I I have small kids, and I turn into a pumpkin at that point, and start to fall asleep unless there's something going on that'll stay up.
I don't even have kids and I turn into a pumpkin at 8. So I can imagine how you do it. Well, okay, so what I'm curious to know, and I get this question a lot actually. Sometimes I'll host virtual like courses where I'm talking about how to pitch stories to the media. And when it comes to local TV, a lot of people ask, who is the best person to pitch a story to? Is it the producer? Is it the reporter? Tell me more about how it works at your station.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best thing you can do, the highest percentage shot you can take, is to figure out which reporter is the right reporter for your story. So if you have a topic or a subject area and there's a Venn diagram where it overlaps with a reporter's beat area or coverage area, that's a great place to start, because a story that a reporter brings to the table is one that generally they're already down the road on a little bit. They've talked to that PR person and they've gathered some data, and maybe they even have a location, in mind for where they can shoot that story. That's going to put you further down the road than pitching to the assignment desk or producer, which can be fruitful. You can still get stories on TV that way. But your best shot on the court, to use a basketball analogy, is going to be to work with a reporter directly, which requires doing some homework and knowing which reporter that is. And the way to get their attention is to say, hey, I noticed you covered this story or these couple stories. They are in the vein of what my pitch is. Can I get you on the phone for 5 minutes to talk about what I have in mind? Showing that you've done that homework, if you're cold pitching somebody, it goes a long way, because we get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails a day from PR folks trying to get stories on television.
I bet. Yeah. So you mentioned before we started recording that you have some advice on how to get somebody's attention. From what you just said, the first thing is knowing who to pitch and understanding their beats, understanding what reporter is going to care the most about the story that you're pitching. What other ways do you recommend somebody, or what do you recommend someone keeps in mind when they're trying to get the attention of a reporter who has hundreds of pitches in their inbox?
Sure. I would say become a viewer or a follower of local news, if that's the area you want to pitch. So if you watch the morning news regularly, if you watch our morning news regularly, you're going to see we have certain reporters who do certain types of stories. When you have that familiarity, you can, in our case, we've got a consumer reporter, and if you had a consumer pitch, you could say, hey, I see that Elizabeth, is on TV, 3 or 4 times a week in Good Morning Cleveland doing consumer stories. I've got a consumer story. That's going to get somebody's attention because you have some familiarity with it, and and it's obvious to the reporter that you've been, that you've been following their work, which goes a really long way, because they'll know they can meet you halfway down the road on a pitch, because it's not just a cold pitch that came out of nowhere, but you obviously did some homework or are familiar with the show and could have some confidence in pitching it.
Yeah, definitely. Gosh, where do I go from here? I know I just actually it's not out there yet. By the time this one publishes, it'll likely be released. But I just spoke with a journalist who does a lot of local reporting. She's independent. Her beat is AI. So she goes on location often to interview the folks that the story is about. And one of her biggest tips was logistics, like in the pitch, being very specific about the location that they're inviting you to go to. All the details you can provide on who it is they'll be interviewing, even like where to park your car. Keep in mind those small details. Would you have anything else to add to that? I'm imagining that your reporters, like you said, go on location a lot. Any advice that my listeners should keep in mind in that regard?
Yeah, they do. That's actually a great segue question, because at the end of the day, television is production. So, I have a print media background, which means in a former life, you could do a story by picking up the phone and having a pencil and writing things down. With television production, if you can't visualize it, it's not going to be a priority, for the station. It's not going to be a priority as a news report. So you have to think in terms of, okay, what's our visual for this, right? What are we going to show people? How are we going to, make this visually interesting? And then the other question a reporter is going to have is who else is going to be in this story, right? So a good TV report doesn't have just one person in it. A good TV report might have, a PR client in it, but then they want to talk to people who are impacted in some way by whatever that story is. So the more you can move a reporter down the line in terms of production, to say like, hey, we can make this location available at this time. There will be people there who can talk. That's going to start really, getting a reporter interested because it solves a lot of production problems for them.
Yeah. All right. So I want to go maybe through the process of can you tell me more about this 9:45 a.m. meeting? I had a note here to follow up on this actually. Tell me more about that process, and maybe there's an interesting story there too, where a PR pitch really stood out. If I might just be making this up, but
yeah. So a PR. So in that meeting, some of the stories that get pitched are, hey, we've got a reporter who covers development, and they're continuing to cover, a story they've been covering. So some of it is just continuing coverage. We call it following through at our station. Some of it is, and this is where it might be interesting to get a pitch from a PR person. Hey, I've got something exclusive, right? That's a big word in TV newsrooms. So, if you're a PR person, you can give somebody an exclusive look at something early. If you can get them access to something nobody else has, that will get people's attention. So, in terms of PR pitches, that's probably the best way if you're working on something where you don't have a previous relationship with the reporter, that could get their attention. If you have established a previous relationship with a reporter, and you can help deliver a good story that is in some way related to the news, you can also help them bring a great pitch to the table that way. But as we're talking about it, some level of exclusivity is definitely, it always gets people's attention. Oh, we're going to be the first ones to see it. We're going to give our viewers the first look at something, the first interview with someone. That matters because that which is rare is valued, right? So if nobody's done something before, then it increases the news value.
Yeah, I I love that you're mentioning this, because I also have had journalists say that is a word or a phrase or label that is abused though. So before you get a bunch of pitches that say exclusive, can you share maybe an example, right, or maybe a bad example of what isn't exclusive? Because even though it might be the first time it's being reported on, you'd be surprised how many people actually to say something is exclusive and then it's not. So listeners, please don't do that. Joe mentioned this needs to be a story that only they are reporting on. So keep that in mind before you use this tactic. But also, what will make a story really stand out as an exclusive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a TV station wants to have ownership of that story, like sole ownership of that story for some length of time. So, we know that once we report something, our competitors are going to call, if it's a really high interest story, our competitors are going to call up, whoever we talk to and say, hey, can we talk? We want to do a story also. We don't use the word exclusive in a lot of our language. You're right. It isn't abused. It is abused, but what it represents is important, what it represents is something new, something fresh, information that has not been revealed before. So that's the value in it. But you're right, the labeling of it has grown tiresome. So, you have to, it's all in the way that you pitch it, right? You want to be the first to tell your viewers about, the first person, my source will interview with. It's that kind of thing, so that we feel like we've won that news cycle, if that makes sense. It's very competitive TV news. We want to be getting things nobody else has.
Yeah. What is the average length of time that you would want an exclusive for?
That's a really good question. I think once something, once we've published something, once we've talked to someone, if somebody's already talking to them the next day, that's understandable. Now, if we work with somebody on a story for 3 or 6 months, we put in a lot of production to it. I think it might feel like a little bit of a betrayal if 12 hours later they were giving the same story to somebody else.
Mhm.
But it's kind of a case by case basis. A lot of times when we work closely with sources and with public information officers or PR folks, we build up these relationships for long periods of time, and we earn trust, and they come back to us, when they've got something new, and it becomes a relationship, and that's can be mutually beneficial for all parties. But the trust has to be there that the second that we publish something, it's not going to just go straight to somebody else. But we're also aware that if you've got something that's really newsworthy, everyone else is going to try to get it too, and you can't be mad that the people you work with are getting phone calls about it.
Right. Yeah, that'd be a very interesting tightrope to walk, I guess. Somebody pitching that
It's a good question for
exclusive.
PR folks. Like, I'd like to hear from the other side, right? Like, you
Yeah.
work with a news organization. If you worked with a Wall Street Journal for 3 months on a story, or how quickly are you calling back their competitors to confirm?
Right.
Generally, when you look at the national press, you see that information gets confirmed like a news cycle or two later. So there,
Mhm.
I think you just want to feel like you own it for a length of time that lets you feel like you owned it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Thanks for explaining more about that. I love that question and that whole topic. It's fascinating to me because it's has so many different meanings depending on who you talk to. Um, all right. So, well, you mentioned in the conversation we had before we started recording that you wanted to really discuss where the needs are, and how PRs can plug in seamlessly to the work that you're doing as a local news station. Are there any other pockets or ways that PRs can jump in and really like be of service to local TV that we haven't touched on yet?
Sure. So I think about this. We have a morning show that, folks come in every day at 2 a.m., to start their shift.
Oh,
And
wow.
right, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And they have to get their stories set up in a lot of cases the day before or the week before. So the morning news is, in our case, at 2.5 hours of programming every day. And we're not always going to have a big breaking news. So morning news is an opportunity to get a story told where you can work with a reporter in advance to have that story, break during, in our case, it's Good Morning Cleveland, break during Good Morning Cleveland. That it's kind of a furnace that always needs to be fed, with new information and fresh news. So morning shows are an opportunity. The other one is weekends. Every TV news channel has weekend shows. They have reporters that work weekends. We still have a 6 o'clock news, and we still have a morning news, and we still have an 11 p.m. news, and we need stories for those programs. So, when I think about like where are the opportunities, it's probably going to be tough to muscle in on the A block of our 6 p.m. news when that is the shift where, we've got our City Hall reporter, and we've got our Cleveland Browns beat reporter, and we've got, our meteorologist, and everybody's, fighting to get into the top of the six, because that's, some of our most valuable television real estate. But we also have a lot of people who watch us in the morning, and a lot who watch us on the weekend, and we have fewer, we have less information coming into the newsroom, which means there's opportunities there to pitch and set something up.
Ooh, I love that advice. I haven't heard that yet. So that's really good to know. Pay attention to those weekend reporters, listeners.
Yeah.
Start following along with what they care about and what
Get
their
to know
beats are.
your weekend reporters and your morning reporters. Those are folks who are constantly looking for stories because they work shifts where information is not just flowing into the newsroom constantly.
Yeah. Okay, I love that. Thanks for that.
Sure.
Great. Well, I love also to have my guests share any shout outs to PR teams that they've worked with and
Sure.
they've really enjoyed working with. Do you have any that you'd
Man,
like to give? And if not, we can.
yeah, I don't know, I don't know if any of this group comprises your audience, but anybody who works in government as a public information officer and returns calls promptly
Hmm.
and responds immediately and shows up on scene, these folks are treasured in newsrooms because when we need information, they are there for us. And there have been a few since I've been working at News 5 where they call back. We need something confirmed. They help us confirm it. So the folks who work for the government, who often work unforgiving hours also, and have a lot of people above them who are putting a lot of pressure on them, they're doing really important work that probably isn't often recognized. And when they do it right, it is greatly appreciated in a newsroom.
That's a fantastic answer, especially right now. They deserve and need a lot of love. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And yeah, that's good to know. I don't know if I have many folks like that for my listeners, but hey, if I can make someone's day in this kind of way, I love that.
Yeah. We
Thanks
so
so
we
much, Joe.
No, for sure. I mean, like I think we had a local. So here's an example of a local pitch I took. I just thought of in Cleveland. We had a tradition, a Christmas tradition of his name is Mr. Jingling, and he brings the Christmas keys. And it was a department store PR stunt that Clevelanders loved and treasured for generations. So when they were bringing back Mr. Jingling to one of the big malls downtown, they pitched it exclusively to Channel 5 because we used to have a connection to Mr. Jingling. And, growing up, I knew who he was, and our 6 o'clock anchor knew who Mr. Jingling was. So when they brought back the new Mr. Jingling, we got an exclusive with him on Public Square, downtown Cleveland, announcing to everybody that he was back. And, stories of nostalgia around Christmas time are great. You see them all the time. And, that was a pitch that was perfect because we had a historic connection to that local character. And we were able to do that story in a way that, made everybody happy. We got something new and exclusive. They got to promote, their the big promotion that they were doing around this character. So that one that was a home run, in terms of here's a perfect pitch at the perfect time that gave us something that, that was fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to find that. So, and I'll link to it in the show notes so that people can check it out. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for your time, Joe. Unfortunately, we're over 20 minutes. I could probably pick your brain about this for like hours. But before we end it, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that we discussed, or did you have any last minute advice for my listeners?
No, I would say, the best thing anybody can do who works in PR is just to build relationships with reporters. Knowing a reporter, having met them, staying in touch with them, 1,000% increases your chances of perhaps getting a story told. So those are your best relationships. I'm sure your listeners know that already. But in the world of TV news, our Rolodexes can never be big enough. So there's always opportunities to meet with people. And if you've got great subject areas that overlap with what local TV news covers, try to make some connections because it could be fruitful.